The last time that I did a crop loss report was back in September, so I thought it would be a good idea to check in and see how things are going now. Overall, I would say that the weather pattern that has been causing so much damage worldwide has not changed and may possibly be becoming more extreme. Before I get into the detailed reports, I want to step back for a few minutes and take a look at the big picture sort of stuff as I've been watching it. I watch the Weather Channel the way some people watch Housewives or something like that. So that's a near obsession, but it's also a way of keeping my finger on the pulse all the time. So back in October, the NOAA agency issued a forecast for the winter of 2018 into 2019, and they said we were going to have a warm, dry winter in the Midwest, and that had been the case for a while. It's what they call an open winter, and they were enjoying the fact that they didn't have a lot of snow. But then in January it changed, and we started to see the appearance of polar vortexes bringing cold air way down into the United States. And this sort of thing causes all kinds of problems with transportation and utility bills and things like this, but the phenomenon that I'm most interested in is how this affects the crop conditions, because that affects whether or not we have enough to eat in the year ahead. But what the vortexes have done has been to drive the frost deeper and deeper into the soil, which means that it will take longer in the spring for the frost to work its way out. And we are seeing reports, for instance, from Wisconsin, where they are worrying that various perennial crops like fruit trees and alfalfa may have been damaged by these heavy frosts on bare ground. And of course, we also have to think about the winter wheat, which is planted in the fall, begins to sprout, and then is covered by snow in a normal year, and the snow protects it from the cold. And if it's not there, then you're going to have damage to that wheat crop. So we've had several of these polar vortexes come down, and at this point in time, if you look at a soil temperature map, you can see that in a large part of the United States, east of the Sierras, east of the Rockies, on into Minnesota and Wisconsin, the soil is very cold. And you can see there's a place where there's a light green line where it's 30 degrees and then 35 degrees and 40 degrees. So the soil has to get to 50 degrees in the spring in order for farmers to have good germination of any seeds that they sow. So we'll be watching this condition. As I recall, last year the soil stayed somewhat cold quite late in the year, and that could easily happen this year, in particular because after the cold surges we started to get these big snowstorms, and over the last month or so we have seen one snowstorm after another march across the country, dumping huge amounts of snow. And even as this would normally come earlier and protect the winter wheat by insulating it, now that it has come after some heavy frosts, we're in a situation where the snow is keeping the cold in the ground. It's protecting the ground from warming up. And until this heavy snow melts, nothing much will happen with the soil temperature, and this could end up delaying the planting season. And we can now see that throughout a large part of the United States, this has been one of the snowiest Februaries since records have been kept. And there are a lot of consequences to this, not just people having to dig out through deep snow. Now, another thing that we've been seeing now, and have been seeing throughout 2018 as well, was heavy rains falling in the southeast United States. And seeing this happening, day after day, week after week, month after month, saturating the ground and then flooding because the water could no longer go into the ground. This will also cause problems with the crops, because if the ground is too wet, the seed will rot, or it will develop funguses and molds that are poisonous, which means that any grain that does grow will be useless. And this is a direct result of that kind of extra rain activity. Now here is a pretty graphic picture of something we've seen again and again this past year, which is you have these giant fronts going almost from border to border, and sometimes actually from border to border, marching across the United States, a warm front on one side and a cold front on the other. And the problem with this is that these fronts have a bigger difference in temperature between the cold side and the warm side, and the upshot of this is that the weather created at those fronts is much more violent than it might be if there was a less temperature differential. You know, if you've been paying attention, this is the end of February, and we are seeing tornadoes in Mississippi. I do not have any memories of seeing tornadoes at the end of February in the United States, and at this point in time I'm really wondering what this means in terms of tornadoes getting stronger as the year progresses. I think it's a possibility. Now, at the same time, when you watch the weather, you see parts of the country, large parts of the country, sometimes having much warmer than normal weather. And this can lead to the sense of a false spring in which fruit trees and other things, nut trees and so on, will blossom and begin the process of creating the crop for the next season. But it's only the end of February. And the problem is that if we have another cold surge come through, which could easily happen, then you have the buds being destroyed by frost, and you cannot restart this process. It's a one-shot deal every year, which means that if you have a false spring and freezing rain on top of the buds, you will not get a crop. So that ends the summary. Now we'll go on to the details, referring to agroinsurance as usual to see what has actually been happening around the world in recent months. In eastern Washington in February, the early part of February, a blizzard killed between $3.5 million and $4 million worth of cattle. This includes dairy farms and beef farms and things. So that's the cost of replacing the cattle, not the cost of the milk and meat that they would have produced. In New South Wales, in Australia, a tropical cyclone, Oma, has ravaged a couple of banana plantations in the Tweed Valley. One grower said that winds at 80 kilometers per hour had destroyed 95% of his Cavendish bunches and had snapped 90% of his Cavendish plants, wiping out 25,000 cartons of banana production. He's looking at a potential $1 million loss. And this was the second time that he has had this problem. 2 years ago, he lost half his crop to Cyclone Debbie. In Tanzania, they are saying that adverse weather conditions have led to millions of dollars in crop losses. They're saying that climate change is costing Tanzania $96 million a year in crop losses, amounting to more than 300,000 tons of maize and legumes. And this is almost 2% of the country's gross domestic product. In Yolo County, California, they are having some increased damage to beehives. They say it's not a huge amount of destruction, but there is already a shortage of beehives in California. Down below there's a picture of beehives being blown into flooded groves. So that's kind of a problem here. See, in California, almond meats made just over $115 million in 2017. So it's a fair amount of change involved in this sort of thing. In the Indian state of Pune, the drought is cutting the production of a variety of crops, including jowar, wheat, gram, and groundnut. They're planting fewer acres because they expect smaller crops. And this has also led to an increase of the prices of jowar, which had been 20 to 25 rupees per kilogram, to almost $40, 40 rupees per kilogram, which of course dramatically affects the people who depend on crops like this for part of their diet. In China, frost has severely reduced the production of tangerines. In Chengde, Hunan, 3 episodes of cold weather and frost since the end of December. Nearly 67,000 hectares of tangerine orchards were effective. The damage was most severe for the early season honey mandarin production areas in Ximen, Zhuping, and Mengquan in Hunan. This is the most severe frost with the widest affected area since the winter of 1976, when temperatures got down to minus 13 degrees centigrade. The cold affected the tangerines, young trees, and even old trees to various degrees. Data shows that nearly 67,000 hectares of tangerine orchards in Chengdu suffered from frost, with the harvest of almost 34,000 hectares completely lost. The damage is in the tens of millions of dollars. In the USA, in California, cauliflower production has been hampered by cool weather. This is from the 22nd of February. Cauliflower is increasingly hard to come by right now as cool, wet weather hampers the California growing regions. Growers say that the shortage has been exacerbated by warm weather a month ago, which brought product on quickly before production halted just as the gap started to appear. The season has had its ups and downs, noted Mark Clogston of Epic Veg, based in Lompoc, California. Storm systems a month ago were followed by warmer weather, which accelerated production. The cooler weather more recently has slowed things down again. There seems to be an industry-wide shortage, with every growing region affected by rain and cool weather. Clogston added that the shortage is not likely to end soon. A month ago we were 2 weeks ahead of schedule, and now we are 2 weeks behind, he said. As a result, we have been in the middle of a gap the last 10 days, and it's expected to remain this way for at least another 2 weeks. So here you see alternation between warm and cold weather causing problems. I remember that at the end of the season last year, some farmers who grow tomatoes for process, which is like tomato sauce, I suppose, were saying that they were thinking about shutting down because they were having trouble getting the crop due to the cold weather. Another consequence of this is that people who buy California produce will find themselves paying more for less product. In Myanmar and Yunnan, banana farmers suffered a lot of damage due to large hail. On the evening of February 17th, hail and strong winds hit Myanmar and Yunnan's banana-producing areas, and banana farmers suffered serious losses. It is understood that the hail in Myanmar lasted for about 10 minutes. The disaster-affected center is mainly located in Santun Village, Mengmo County, and Myitkyina Province. The unbagged bananas were damaged by hail, and some newly picked banana plantations were damaged. It will continue to affect the quality and yield of subsequent bananas. So here's another part of the continuing damage. We hear about large hail damaging crops, killing cattle, hurting people, going on all over the world. You're seeing places where hail is like a foot deep on the ground. In Spain, temperature swings have caused damage to strawberries. Technicians of the Phytosanitary Alert and Information Network of Andalusia have confirmed that the sharp temperature swings recorded in recent weeks in Huelva's strawberry plantations have been causing damages to the fruit. To be precise, the main issues that are being detected are soft tips and cracking. And this is another part of the problem. We're seeing this in the United States as well, and this is the damage to come as we swing back and forth between too hot and too cool. In Australia, we've seen another type of problem where a vineyard lost most of their crop to a fire on harvest day. It says Topper's Mountain Wine suffered devastating losses as it geared up to harvest this year's grapes. The Tinga Plateau fire, which began on February 10 and was believed to have been caused by lightning strikes, first struck the vineyard's southerly boundary on 13th of February after strong southerly winds blew drifting embers into the vines. So according to preliminary figures, this fire burned more than 23,400 hectares of land, destroyed 13 houses and 44 outbuildings, and damaged another 6 houses and 13 outbuildings. No fatalities, but think back to the California fires of 2018 where huge amounts of property were destroyed, and I'm sure some crops and things with that as well. So this is something that happens with drought. At the same time, perhaps we have an atmosphere that has higher electrical charges, more likely to cause lightning and therefore disastrous fires. One thing I will say is that it seems to me that the tempo of crop damage reports has picked up dramatically since September. I've gone through maybe a dozen items so far, and I'm still in February of this year, so we'll just see what else goes on. In Oman, farmers in Dhofar say they are still counting the cost of Cyclone Mikunu, which hit the Dhofar governorate in May 2018 and caused the deaths of thousands of prized livestock at an estimated cost of more than 12 million of their currency. The cyclone's devastating effects spiked annual figures for dead cows, sheep, and camels in the governorate. Government body BEA, Oman's official environmental agency, revealed that on average 430 animals died every week for the whole of 2018, with Mikunu driving that number higher than previous years. The agency cleared the remains of 22,890 animals for the year, which is much higher than normal, and farmers are still coming to terms with the impact. In India, 21st of February, intense rain and hailstorm may lead to heavy crop damage in Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, UP. Northwest India is all set to experience another episode of heavy rain and hailstorm activities. In fact, some activities have already been seen over many parts of northwest India, including Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, and NCR. While it may bring cheers for the common man, but these rains might bring a big jolt for the farmers. Farmers across these regions are already grieving for the widespread crop loss during the last few days. Weathermen are predicting this spell as the most prolonged and heaviest one for northwest India in the season so far. One cannot ignore the heavy crop damage which would be caused due to hailstorm activities. The major crops such as wheat, barley, rice, jowar, bajra, and maize will be the victim of these activities. And this is grand solar minimum, increased cosmic rays, increased cloud nucleation, increased rainfall, causing things like this. In Pakistan, rains have negatively impacted quinoa production. According to Mohammad Nawaz Mekan, director of Citrus Research Institute in Sargodha, quinoa growers are facing problems due to the recent rains and uncertain weather conditions. Meeting export targets is becoming exceedingly very difficult for them. Last year, 253 million euros worth of quinoas was exported. He stated that the shelf life of quinoas has been reduced to the rains, a situation that has a negative impact on quinoa exports. The current rains will probably be beneficial for quinoa orchards in the next season, and they're working on making efforts to solve the problems. The growers demand that the government gives this matter a priority. Currently, some farmers are reluctant to maintain their orchards due to this crisis. So, you see a change in the weather pattern that is causing change in the crops and amount of crops that people are producing. In Cyprus, on the 18th of February, a morning hailstorm destroyed crops. Early on Thursday, a sudden hailstorm devastated potatoes, onions, and kohlrabi in Cyprus's Famagusta district. After torrential rain the previous evening, hail fell from 4 a.m. until 5:30 a.m. on Thursday morning, General Secretary of Farmers Union Panagrotikos Tassos Iapanis said. He called the results of the weather a major disaster. The hail hit Avgoru, Xylophagou, and Leopetri. Iapanis said that the union has called on the Agriculture Insurance Organization to visit the affected area and record the damage. He added that before the storm, this year was expected to be a good year for potatoes, but the severe weather has now caused a lot of damage. So the damage is global. And you see in the picture, this was golf ball size hail basically. In Australia, they have suffered a loss of cattle in the range of $5 billion, where the loss was largely uninsured. Devastating flooding in Queensland's northwest is feared to have killed about 500,000 cattle and left farmers with an estimated loss of $5 billion, but mostly not covered by insurance. The Cattle Council of Australia says the full extent of the losses is difficult to calculate, but feedback from the affected properties suggests that more than 500,000 animals have died. 800 properties affected, 13.25 million hectares, an area twice the size of Tasmania, uninsured because insurance is so expensive. And if memory serves, this part of Australia had previously had cattle losses due to drought, so now they've gone from drought to flooding, and the same thing is happening. In India, growers of Arabica coffee are bracing for a poor harvest. A pall of gloom has descended on Arabica coffee growers in Samarpet, who are bracing for a poor harvest caused by the untimely rains. During the previous monsoon, which witnessed heavy rains, coffee growers had suffered huge crop losses. Most of the Arabica coffee plantations had been hit by the disease. Growers cheered when coffee plants survived in a handful of plantations and coffee buds were beginning to bloom, but their happiness did not last long, as untimely rains in different parts of the district has cast a cloud of suspicion on a bumper crop for coffee growers. It says more than 33% of the crop was lost due to natural calamity a year ago. If the flowers bloom in March, the harvest would be at the right time, but if not, then they're in trouble. And this is the crop that needs just the right amount of rain at the right time. If they don't get it, they have to water it, which increases the costs for the farmers. And a grower in Nagesh said that many coffee growers were facing financial problems as they were yet to receive compensation from the government. In South Africa, estimated crop of avocados is down around 30%. The initial estimate for the 2018-2019 season was between 15.5 and 16 million 4-kilogram cartons, and this is a reduction of around 6 million cartons from last year's record crop, due partly to unfavorable weather conditions. During weeks 39 to 49 of their year, much of South Africa experienced a heat wave, resulting in heavy fruit drop on especially young fruit trays on Hass and Hass-type trees that set during this period. Some in the industry estimate the nationwide losses due to fruit drop as much as 40% in established blocks. But the decrease will be buffered by new avocado plantings coming into production. So I'm going to stop here. I mean, you get the picture. I've only worked my way back to the 14th of February 2019, and there's just many reports. So this speaks of increased costs for food for everybody in the world, decreased supplies, risk of famine if this kind of thing continues. So I recommend that everybody do what I'm trying to do, is to grow something that you can eat, because you may feel like you're going to need it in the months ahead and the years ahead. If present trends continue, food will be a problem.